So Maureen, what is the Cooking Diary study and what have you learned from it?
Okay, thank you. So Cooking Diaries is a study which we have done in Kenya, and it's been done in other countries. And I would explain that Cooking Diaries is an intense data collection of what people cook in a household, how it is cooked, and the time taken to cook the meal, and specifically to cook that specific food until from the start until it's served, and the type of fuel used, and also the quantity the quantity of the fuel that has been used. So this is putting a household into like recording everything that is done in their kitchen, that is recording breakfast, what they've cooked for breakfast, what they've cooked for lunch, what they've cooked for dinner, and breaking down this, like what they've cooked for dinner. We need, like, if it is like 3 servings, if it's ugali, how long did ugali take to cook, how long did vegetables take to cook, and how long did any other stew that was served take to cook. So we normally give them a cooking diary booklet where they fill all this information. We have research assistants who normally go to their households during the study to just check that they are recording and keeping the flips on, so that when we are doing the data entry and analysis, we have the right information we have collected. The cooking diaries, we normally also give them, we give the households some equipments. Like the previous one, we gave them electric pressure cooker, a rice cooker, a hot plate, and 3 kg gas cylinder. And all these are, including a meter reader, and all these appliances were supposed to be used during the cooking diary studies. So within the first 2 weeks of the study, they were free to use any appliances which they would prefer, or any fuels which they also had in their houses, including charcoal and kerosene, all fuels that are available in their households. And then after 2 weeks, we now restrict the households to cook with electricity and try as much as possible to use the appliances which we have given them. So yeah, I would basically say that is cooking diaries. What I've learned during the cooking diaries, one, I would say behavior change. It is one of the most difficult things to change in a household or even an individual. So behavior change is the big challenge we have. About the demonstrations, it has really changed the mindsets of a household and even the community in general. So when we do demonstrations and everyone is looking at the units used to cook a meal, everyone goes like, what is this real? But when they are there and they are looking at it the way the food is being cooked and the time it's being, we are easily winning their mindset. So yeah, everyone is like, where do I get these equipments? So you can easily see that the mindset is changing. With the cooking diaries, I've learned a lot of cooking tips, which I would say I was so poor in my kitchen. One of it, and it's very common with any other household, is when we are cooking, we like opening the pot, trying to taste the food if it's well cooked, and tasting the spices and all that. And during that process, I would say a lot of energy is being lost. So that is one of the tips that I've learned, that if I have to cook on an open plate, then I have to use the lid and try as much as possible to retain the lid when the food is cooking, so that I am energy efficient in that process. Other cooking tips, I would say, like soaking the heavy foods like beans and maize. If you have time, it's better to soak them for some time, even if it's 2 hours or overnight. the more you soak, the more the food gets tender, and that would mean that when you bring them to cook, it will take the shortest time possible. Procedures. I've learned that it is not all the procedures that we've stuck to from what we learned from our parents is what gives us the best meals. I have learned that with some simple procedures like putting all ingredients together and letting the food boil and until there's less water in the food, it gives like very nice, tasty, delicious food. So that is one of the cooking tips which I've also learned. And also, the smaller the pieces, the quicker the food will cook. So if you have your meat and you cut it into smaller pieces, the better. If you are boiling your sweet potatoes, your yams, if you cut them into smaller pieces, the faster the food will cook. Yeah.
Great. What a comprehensive response to that question. Thank you.
Okay.
So next question is, who are ACTS and what is their role in the MECS program?
Okay, so African Center for Technology Studies is an intergovernmental research organization. So it strengthens the capacity and policies in Africa and African countries and African institutions, sorry. So this is to harness science, technology, and innovation for sustainable development. So ACTS will take an active role under the MECS project to pursue like transformations through the multidisciplinary research, evidence, and policy as a tool to convening and the various stakeholders and facilitating effects of policies and the new business frameworks and models that are coming in the new system. So I would say that renewable energy generation is increasingly getting access to affordable and reliable electricity. So therefore, we have like new opportunities that are coming up in the sector, and ACTS will take an active role in maybe creating these new business models, these new business frameworks, and also trying to look at these enabling environment and enabling policies and standardizations in making this sector more friendly, I would say, making it friendly to either business people, research people, and everyone in general. So together with the MECS objectives, ACTS will work as a lead in Africa and try to break the business as usual system, which we've been in it for ages, and try to bring new technologies on board to do the knowledge brokerage in it, more research, and policy convening and analysis, and also contributing in this policy environment. So basically, ACTS leads in the research, policy convening and policy analysis, technology brokerage, and more in capacity building.
Great, thank you. And John, feel free if you want to just come in on any of these questions. So the next question is, how can we categorize the different types of dishes that Kenyans typically cook? What are the sort of, the key categories of Kenyan cooking?
Okay, so the key categories of Kenyan cooking, I would say the first one is the heavy foods, which take maybe 3 to 6 hours of boiling or cooking. So this would include, depending on the fuel you are using, this would include like things like beans, matumbo, which is tripe, meat stews, which meat stews can be beef, mutton, lambs, and this is like one of the most common foods in Kenya. So the second category is staples. So staples would be things like ugali. It doesn't take long, but you have to maybe boil a little boiling and then into the mixing of stuff. So ugali, rice, pilau, matoke also falls in that category. Yeah, and then the next type of food would say frying. Maybe we need a pan frying. Pan frying we can use to make things like chapati, flatbreads. Yes, and then we also have deep fried foods. So deep fried, people deep fry chicken. We have mandazi or the donuts. Any other things that are deep fried? I don't think I can remember any other thing that can be deep fried. And then we also have other meals that can be quick fried. So quick fried can be vegetables, sukuma wiki, eggs. I think I'm confusing that side, John.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, so I think in terms of the order, then the table, then it was flatbreads after. I mean, the order doesn't matter, but when you started talking about the frying, I thought you were going to talk about the sukuma wikis, the way that you were describing it. So for me, the biggest difference, the reason why the flatbreads are in a different
the quick
category.
fries.
Mm-hmm. The reason why the flatbreads are in a different category is because they require very even heat and a medium heat on the pan, whereas quick frying, generally it's higher heat, and you can do it quite easily in a deep pan. And so the main reason why we've differentiated them as two categories is because the chapati is basically impossible to cook on an EPC, whereas things like sukuma wikis, then you can cook on an EPC, especially if people give you a demonstration when you first get the appliance.
So categorizing different foods in Kenya, I would say we have heavy foods, which would take long to boil. You need like 3 to 5 hours to boil the food first. So these are things like beans, matumbo, githeri, meat stew, and stuff. And the other one is the staples, which would need like shorter boiling, maybe 30 minutes to 1 hour. And these would include things like rice, pilau, matoke, and mokimo, or mashed potatoes and maize, pre-boiled maize. And then we have the quick fries, which include things like vegetables. We don't need really boiling. We just have to put in your ingredients and the oil, and then put the food, and within 5 minutes or 10, it's well cooked. And then we also have the deep fried foods, which you need to really have high temperatures to heat the oil. And these include things like mandazi or donut, deep fried chicken, and maybe pork. Also, people also deep fry pork. And then we also have the flatbreads. So these are things like chapati, and you really need a pot that you need it wide open, and energy on the surface is actually almost evenly distributed in the pot. And these are things like chapati, which every household would say is more of a weekly meal. So, and then we also have things that maybe would need baking or an oven, so but not really common in Kenya.
That was perfect, thank you. Can I ask, how important are each of these different categories of food? You say baking is not really important, so it's more of an occasional thing. What about the other foods? How often do people cook heavy foods, or how often do they make chapati, for example?
I would say heavy foods are, every household would have an heavy food in a day. So heavy foods are more of the main things that people cook in Kenya. So everyone would maybe serve their chapati with beans or chapati with any other cereals, green grams, lentils, which really need like heavy cooking or foods that would take longer to cook. So I would say heavy foods are mainly in every household in Kenya and happens like on a daily basis. Staples are also staples are everyday thing, but it is easy and quick to cook.
What about the other ones? How often do you deep fry, for example?
Oh, I explain all of it.
Yeah, I'll just go down and say, like you said, for baking, we don't bake very often, or deep frying. Maybe you might say we eat lots of deep fried things, but mostly we buy them as street food rather than prepare them at home. Whatever you think is a good way of describing how often, how important these different categories are on the Kenyan menu.
Ah, okay. So I would say staples is also an everyday and every meal prepared in every household. So it is quite a day in day activity in no, let me just start.
Yeah, if you find that you stumble on anything or you think of a better way of saying it, just go for it again, because we'll just edit out like all of this that we're recording now. We're going to edit it down into just a few minutes. So just say it cleanly afterwards and we'll cut that bit.
Okay. So staples are very important in every household. I would say every household would have a meal that is shortly boiled and later maybe you do the stew of it, or you do the stew and leave it to simmer for some time. So this is a procedure that every household in every meal would have to do. For the quick fry food, things like sukuma wiki, it's also an everyday or every meal activity. And then in Kenya, for the deep frying, it is not an everyday thing in an household. I would say maybe things like mandazi, people can easily buy them from someone who has a vendor who's doing this as a business from maybe a shop outside their estate or a shop within their reach, and this is a norm in our communities. So for the flatbreads, we really need like a pan and more open, and the heat should be very evenly distributed. And these kind of meals are not an everyday thing in Kenyan household. And I'd say maybe a household would prepare chapati for maybe a whole bag of it and refrigerate what remains after they've eaten the meal and take it for 2-3 other days. So it is not an everyday thing, and some households would actually prefer going to buy from maybe a vendor outside their estate or on the streets. Yeah.
Cool. So we know that EPCs can't cook all foods. Can you talk us through how compatible these types of foods are with an EPC?
Okay, I would say an EPC is compatible to varieties of foods in Kenya. And I would say majority of the foods that we serve on our tables are actually can be cooked on electric pressure cooker. It's only maybe the pan frying or the deep frying that would really need like another option of fuel. But with an EPC, I would say almost 90% of our foods can be cooked in an electric pressure cooker. As you've heard, most of our foods are long boiled or shortly boiled and do the stew part of it. And this can be easily done on an electric pressure cooker or even a rice cooker. Yeah, thanks.
Great. And
can I just ask you a follow-up one to that one?
Yeah.
Are there any challenges with cooking any of the other foods on an EPC? For example, ugali. We know that people can cook ugali on the EPC, but for some people, it's not instinctual. So maybe if you could just talk us through the other categories and any challenges that you think may arise with each of those.
Okay. So the challenges on using electric pressure cooker on a few of our main dishes, probably like ugali. It is possible to cook ugali in an EPC, but then the paste itself doesn't come out as people are used to. So like when you're cooking ugali in an EPC, it doesn't harden or gets to the harder paste which you would get in an open pot. So, and sometimes stirring the ugali, you really need to stir it a lot. And using an EPC, when you're stirring, if you don't have the right equipment to hold on the pot, it keeps rotating and it becomes disadvantaged in getting to what we are really used to. And also the taste, because it doesn't really heat up very well, so the taste is a bit different, but it is it is served as ugali but with slightly different taste.
Great. And how much electricity do Kenyan households generally use to cook?
It depends on how regular you use the electricity, and also it depends on the appliances which you've used. So if you use a hot plate, you would definitely use more units to cook a meal because there is a lot of heat loss around it. But if you use like the right energy efficient appliances, then that it makes sense as all the energy is centralized, and the incubation of the energy also helps the food cooks quickly, and hence it becomes an energy efficient appliances. So you wouldn't use more units when you're using an energy efficient appliance. I would say on an estimate in my house, I would pay maybe 700 shillings for an extra for having cooked with electricity in a month, and that is like every other meal, using electricity on every other meal.
So would you say that you cook half of your food with electricity, or you use it for just maybe one dish in every other meal? What so people get an idea of what proportion, and how much do you spend on the other fuel, which I assume is gas? Is that right?
Yeah.
So if you could tell us what's your monthly cooking cost, so, or how often you fill up your gas cylinder, how much it costs, and how much of your cooking roughly you do on each. Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? That kind of thing?
Okay. So in my house, I use electricity to cook most of the stews, like beef, chicken, pork, fish. And on average, I have spent like 700 shillings extra on my monthly electricity bill because of cooking with electricity. And the other option I have is the LPG, which we refill the 13 kg cylinder with 2,100 shillings. And that would take me for a month and 2 weeks.
And does the gas cylinder last longer now that you're able to cook some of the food with electricity?
Sorry?
Does the gas cylinder last longer now that you're able to cook some of the food with electricity?
Yes, of course, using electricity to cook on these, of course, using electricity to cook most of my stews, it saves me from using the gas, So gas, I would say I use it to cook meals like chapati, frying eggs in the morning, or making my husband's ugali. But then when my husband maybe has traveled and is not in for the meal, then I can easily use my rice cooker to even prepare my ugali, and we can easily cook using electricity purely when my husband is not around.